Welcome to the Americus podcast. I am John Schroeder, and today I am joined by Aaron Carter. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
So Aaron, I got a chance to hear about your name through a fellow friend, Paul Nixon from Albany. Paul Nixon has been just a huge influence in my life. He is such an expressive person. He's fun to be around. And he told me when I moved to Americus, he said, all right, if you're going to move to Americus, I need you to meet somebody. And so he mentioned your name, Aaron Carter. And so we started the podcast, and he said, you got to get Aaron Carter to share a story. And so he gave me your number, and he said that, hey, I'm going to let Aaron know you're going to talk to him. And so we called each other, or I called you, and we talked through just kind of a basic rendition of what this is and a little bit of your story. And you committed to come and be a part of the podcast, and so I thank you for that, to come and share your story. So tell me a little bit about your life. I've already read, you share with me just via email some of your story, and man, there's a lot there, and I'm excited about hearing that story again just by you sharing it. So tell me a little bit about who Aaron Carter is, and how did you get to Americus, Georgia?
Well, it's hard to say who Aaron Carter is because Aaron Carter is still being made and still being transformed. But I guess Aaron Carter starts, as a child. And I'm the son of I guess my dad was a farmer when I was a little boy. So my mom's a nurse. She started when I was 6 years old. Or 4 years old in the emergency room, worked emergency, labor and delivery, OR, the ER. I mean, she's done it all. She ended her career in home health and hospice. And she said that was the best thing is to ever watch. First, to watch God's miracle of people being born and babies come into the world. And the second miracle is people leaving the world and to be at peace and to see their soul at rest. So I've had a lot of nursing, or I guess doctoring, just throughout my whole life. I remember one time as a child I got shot in the head with a BB gun, and my stepsister freaked out.
Yeah.
They called 911, the paramedics showed up, they called my mom. My mom's like, if he's not dying, just leave him there, I'll come home.
Yeah. Was this like a friend thing, or was this
like
a family affair?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a friend and I decided to have a BB gun fight.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, really stupid.
Yeah.
Neither of us were wearing safety glasses or goggles or face masks or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom came home and cut the BB out of my head at the kitchen table.
That's a good moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of who she is.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a whole lot said about it after that. I mean, in hindsight, it's a hilarious story. But my dad was a local farmer. I remember my grandpa owned as far as you could see in every direction. We lived on a plateau in northern Utah, I want to say 15 miles from the Colorado border and maybe 20 miles from the Wyoming border.
Wow.
Harsh winters, real rugged mountainous. What we didn't own, he leased from the BLM for, it was a 99-year lease at $1 a year.
Wow.
He ended up losing all of it in my teenage years for back taxes. But that's some of my earliest memories is harvesting broccoli and potatoes with my uncles. My Uncle Tom used to carry a salt shaker in his left pocket and pepper in the right. And we'd go down the rows and grab the potatoes and throw them in the pickup truck, and you always take one potato off, usually the smallest one, and cut it in half. Half goes in the hole, and the other half is what we get to eat.
Yeah.
And the same thing, harvesting broccoli. I remember walking through there, and they'd have a big old pocket knife. And as a 6-year-old boy, I mean, the pocket knife was huge.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In reality, it's probably only like 6 to 8 inches, but it was big enough you could cut the broccoli off and throw it in the truck.
Yes. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I got to tell you something. My wife doesn't believe that people should eat raw potatoes, and I eat raw potatoes, and so it's I'm great. There's great knowing that that's a thing. So.
There's actually a man up in Buena Vista I bought potato from when I first moved here 10 years ago. And I asked him, I said, well, how much are it for a potato? And he told me they were like $5 a pound. I mean, something silly. Yeah. And I told him, I said, I don't want a pound, I just want one potato. And he goes, well, what potato do you want? And I said, and I started, I want this one. How much for this one potato? And he said, just one, you can have it. And I took a bite of it right there. He said, you're gonna get worms, parasites. Yeah. And I looked at him, and I looked at that potato, and I brushed the dirt off, and I said, there's no parasites there. And I ate that whole potato. Yes. But that's how I grew up. Yeah. You know, as a child, we used to say God made dirt, and dirt don't hurt. Yeah. You know, I don't know if that's a true statement or not. There's a lot of viruses and parasites and everything else, you know. Yeah. Now that I'm an adult, I'm not sure I want to fool with, but that's great. But that's honestly that's my first memory growing up is harvesting potatoes with Tom and Shane and Jeff, and my mom would drive the truck. And crazy thing, asparagus is what I want to say like $14, $15 a pound. Mm-hmm. And growing up, it was a weed that grew in the ditch. I mean, it was good for nothing but feeding the deer and the cattle. Yeah. And my mom used to go and cut it with scissors every now and again, and we'd have some for supper when there was nothing else around, but it was a weed. Yeah, wow. And artichoke, same thing. They're just nasty weed flowers that grow in the ditch bank, you know. They had planted them one year and then they couldn't get rid of them, literally. And I love that kind of thing. Broccoli, asparagus, spinach, potatoes, the plants that I grew up on is pretty much still the staple that I live on today. Unfortunately, I pay for them today. It's expensive, but yeah.
That's great. So, young, infant, first memories, where does Aaron Carter go from there?
Well, you know, honestly, I don't know where you want me to go from there. If you want me to go to growing up and my dad going to prison and all that. Yeah. Share all that. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's if you don't mind, I think that's a pretty good indicator of where you begin to feel probably isolated and trying to figure out, okay, who am I now? You know, a lot of this. So, yeah.
Well, right about that same time, 6 years old or so, maybe 5. I mean, I don't remember exact dates, but I do remember we moved off the farm because we couldn't. It was right after my mom went to work at the hospital. We couldn't afford to live. We couldn't afford to eat. I remember we had a great big huge pile of corn, and it was sweet corn they had harvested, and they piled it all out right behind it. We lived in a single wide trailer. We weren't allowed to eat any of it because it was seed for next year. But all the mice and rats could go eat all they wanted, but we couldn't have any of it. And my mom told me that was the final straw. My mom met my dad, Ken, who to me really is my dad. He's the man that raised me, taught me right from wrong, walked me through all of my social awkwardness, and in my teenage years. Yeah.
Where did they meet?
I'm not even sure where they met. They met at a singles adult conference somewhere in Colorado, but I'm not sure all the exact details. My mom said that they met, they got talking, she prayed about it, and she knew that he was the right one. And then when she came home, she had a dream about him, We need to back up a little bit though.
Yeah.
My parents are Mormons.
Okay.
So they met at a Mormon single adult conference.
Okay.
But she had visions or dreams about them going to the temple together, doing all their little temple work, whatever together. So she just knew that he was the right one.
Okay. Did you guys attend what do they call their weekly gatherings or
Church?
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you guys go?
We
Were you
did.
regular attenders? Okay.
Regular attenders. To be worthy,
Mm-hmm.
you have to attend church every Sunday.
Okay.
For those that don't understand and don't know, Mormonism, they do consider themselves Christians. And I have met quite a few who are true believers in Jesus. But as a religion, they believe that the grace of God comes in after everything else you can physically do on this earth. Once you die, if you were good enough, then you get grace. And you can go to one of multiple levels of heaven.
Okay. So she had dreams that Ken and her need to be together, and so it happens.
It happens.
Right? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And
So Ken comes into the picture.
right. And like I said, I'm pretty sure I was 8, 9 years old, right around in there. And that's the point where he was unworthy with whatever he had going on in his life, so he couldn't baptize me. But I remember sitting down with the bishop and multiple times, and all this that's happened to you, this doesn't have anything to do with you. Do you accept Jesus into your life? I mean, basically the same kind of counseling session that we have as Christians. And I did accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior in my life at that time, not necessarily fully realizing that I'm also being baptized into a religion, that this was membership into a religion. But even today, I still remember the conversations of, you ask Jesus into your life, and he becomes your Lord and Savior, and all your sins are washed away, and you become a new creation, and all of this bad that's happened to you, none of it matters anymore, and none of this has anything to do with you. And I agree. I want
Yeah.
I want to be new.
Yeah.
So, based on my background and what had happened to me, I think that was kind of the counseling session that went. I don't know, like I said, what everybody else goes through. How those conversations look. But so for me, that was it. I agreed to it, and
Yeah. So I was 8 or 9 years old.
Right.
Okay.
Right in there. I mean, I was older than 8. It was in the summer or early winter. My parents got married Thanksgiving, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the Thanksgiving weekend. And it was right before that is when I got married, sometime in the summer, August, September. And it was actually my childhood best friend's dad that baptized me. And I have all kinds of, not just emotional, but mental conflicts on all of that. It's an issue that my wife and I talk about at least once a year. I'd say she brings it up.
Yeah.
She's continuously advocating that I need to be rebaptized, or I should be, or is it real? But that's a whole separate issue. We can get back to that later. We moved as soon as I got married, we moved to Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay. For business, for just family dynamics, or?
A couple of different reasons. One, moving to Salt Lake City, my mom got a job at LDS Hospital, and she could make the same money in a 8-hour shift that it took her to make 16 hours
Yeah.
in the little tiny town we were in.
Yeah.
Same company,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Intermountain Healthcare is where she worked, but bigger city, bigger money.
Yeah.
And the other dynamic is that that's where all of Ken's children were, all my stepbrothers and sisters.
Okay.
So I have a family. I have 3 biological brothers,
Okay.
2 stepsisters, and 4 stepbrothers.
Okay.
None of which I am real actively, what's the word for it? Engaged with.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of all gone our own ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember Jennifer's the oldest. She was in college when our parents got married. And Ricky, or Forrest, is 2 years younger than my younger brother. So he's 4 years younger than I am. And when we moved to Salt Lake, he came to live with us. And Kimberly, my sister, which put 6 of us in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, which was
Yeah.
very, very interesting. I remember there was 4 of us that shared a bedroom. I had a dresser on this side, and you had a dresser on this side. And at one point, we lined them all down the center, and this is our half, this is your half, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And bunk beds on this wall, and bunk beds on that wall.
Mm-hmm.
It
And
was-
coordinate the bathroom breaks.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and as a 8, 9, 10-year-old, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But and the crazy thing, the house that we rented was right next to, or our backyard was the schoolyard.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
all we had to do was just jump the fence to a school, or walk down two houses down and go through the little alleyway.
Yeah.
So we didn't have far to go. But I look back at it now, and I didn't know any difference back then. I mean, poverty is I don't want to say a learned narrative, or it's more of an acceptance. And I've come to believe the only shame in poverty is not doing anything to get out of it. But too often we as human beings look at those in a lower class than us, or that don't make as much as us, they don't have what we have, and we look down on them for it. But we fail to see the struggles, and sometimes you just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. You can't see the difference. And talking with my mom, that's kind of where we were at. She couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and she married this man that she knew they were going to be together, and it just compounded and made things worse. He was millions in back child support. They actually arrested him a couple of different times. I was not aware of until I was a teenager that he had been arrested and spent a couple nights in jail for back child support. He didn't have a driver's license for back child support. I mean, and eventually my mom started paying his child support. But that's kind of their issue. But that's how I kind of my growing up, or my childhood, we'll say. About the time I was 11 or 12, the dysfunction in my life caught up with me. And it wasn't just my life. I had no one really to look up to. My mom working double shifts at the hospital, my dad running around trying to chase 10 children around, keep track of all of us. And I can only imagine the headache that he had. And then you try to find time for personal care and time with your spouse and everything else. I mean, I can imagine the overwhelming stress that he was under.
Yeah.
But all of us got in trouble. I'm not going to say I was in any more trouble than my siblings.
Yeah. Were you able to process that? I mean, it definitely like right now you're able to process, like, my parents were going through a lot.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I understand now. But did you understand it at 11, 12 years old, or do you just feel
No.
like, I just feel like nobody cares. I feel like I'm here.
That's it. I just felt like I'm here.
And
We're here together.
yeah.
We have no supervision. Nobody cares. We just do what we want.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, at 12 years old, I mean, I was so out of control. I don't want to say kleptomaniac, but I mean, we were a whole family full of kleptomaniacs. I mean, there wasn't a grocery store within 5 miles of our house that me, my stepsister, either of my older brothers, or my younger brother or younger stepsister, we were allowed in. We had been kicked out because we couldn't keep things out of our pockets and our hands to ourselves. I mean, I remember the stupidity of it. Like, I stole straight razors just to have a straight razor. I mean, what's a 12-year-old kid gonna do with, you know, a little matchbook size razor blade? And it was a 5-pack. I didn't even need them. I didn't even want them.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know at that time. I just couldn't. It was a compulsive behavior I couldn't control. But after my stepsister and I stole the check out of a mailbox, went to one of these check cashing places and went and she tried to sign it off that she was the lady and had lost her ID and we just need to sign the check. I remember going to court and the judge telling my mom, either you get your son under control or the state will. And at this point in my life, I can look back at it and I regret all of it. But at that time in my life, I felt like, who cares? If you cared, you'd be here. And she wasn't. But she sent me to live with some family friends, kind of a foster care situation.
How did you receive that? Her sending you off to that? Do you see that as a good move at the time, or do you see this as like
at the time,
challenge?
At the time, I was indifferent of it all.
Okay.
Very rapidly, though, after I had got there, it was a huge positive. My entire life was structured. You get up in the morning, they had chickens, they had rabbits, they had goats, they had pigs. So you get up in the morning and the first thing you do is you do your chores. Rain, shine, winter, summer, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
You go and you make sure the animals have water, you make sure the animals have food. And they had 10 children. I fit right, I would say third down. So there was one that was 12 months older than me and one child 12 months younger than me.
Yeah.
And the next one, 12 or 24 or 18 months younger. So I was right there, but it was very structured. I remember during the summertime, we would ride our bicycles from their family farm 5 miles downhill into town to go to the swimming pool or go to the fun park or whatever, which fun park back then was just a park with the merry-go-round and stuff. There wasn't none of this bowling or go-kart racing, any of that we got today. But then you had to ride your bike 5 miles uphill back to the house. And they had like a family rec center pass and a swimming pool pass. So once we got done with our chores and we did whatever, we could ride our bicycles down to town, or we could go up to they had a grocery store about 3 miles uphill the other direction, which that was a nice ride. You pedal uphill and then you could turn around and coast back to the house. And there were some apple trees on the way, so we could stop and climb an apple tree, get an apple on the way back.
So you had some structure, you had some accountability. Hey, did you do your chores? You had some, some of that community that was there for you.
Absolutely.
And so that helped kind of shape. Okay, this is good. Like I can kind of walk in this.
Really, I was, even though I had that structure and I could work very well and I thrived physically and mentally, I was still an emotionally broken person. And acting out that love or acceptance I had felt as a child, which you know, there's the saying, hurt people hurt people. All I did was hurt somebody else the way I had been hurt. Not even realizing that I was hurt and acting out. I also, part of what I was doing was I had to go to therapy every week. You know, once a week I met with a therapist. I don't even remember who it was, to be honest with you. But I could still picture the building. I can't picture their face. But yeah, I mean, that was a good time and a, you know, looking back, a bad time in my life.
How long were you with that family?
I was with that family about 9 months.
Okay.
However, in that 9 months, because of the structure, I was in Boy Scouts, and in that 9 months, I had gone from your average novice, I mean, whatever it was, you know, just starting out, to, I mean, I was 1 merit badge or 2 merit badges away from getting my Eagle Scout, and then an Eagle Scout project. That's how well I thrived in that rigid structure.
Yeah.
And after that 9 months, when they sent me home, and I couldn't do it. I had like a family living skills, merit badge to do, and like a pottery or some kind of art, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember I sat down and I talked to my mom about the family skills, and she said, you know, we would, you know, work on it, this, that, the other. And within weeks, the dysfunction that I was living with, I mean, I was just lost interest. I went right back to doing what I was doing, which got me in trouble to begin with. However, while I was out of the home, both my sister and my brother, just older than me, both got caught with drugs, and they had put them in a drug rehabilitation center. They went to a rehabilitation called Turnabout, which was more of a tough love of the 90s, and you're going to carry the weight of your sins, you know, or so as punishment, like they would lie, or they would, you know, tell an untruth. They would have to carry around a phone book, you know, for a week. You tell 2 lies, now you got 2 phone books. If there were some of them toted around backpacks.
Yeah, wow.
You know, I don't know of anybody that was toting around like an Army sea bag, but I mean, it could get to that.
Yeah.
But when I came home, and like I said, I went pretty much right back to what it was, and then at 14, my mom tried to pull a stop, and she got me out of school, put me in a Christian private school, where again there was a lot of freedom there, but it was also very structured. And I was able to pick and choose. Basically, we worked on the packet system, so I could pick and choose what packets I wanted to do, what I liked. Of course, there were required classes. You had to take an English, you had to take a spelling, and I was all right there, but I loved math. Yeah. And so that's what I always went to. If we're going to do busy work, I'm going to go do, you know, math homework. Yeah. That's also where I started drugs, sex. It's crazy that in the Christian culture is no different than any other culture. Teenagers are teenagers, no matter where they go, no matter what they do. And it wasn't long before one of these friends that I had said, "Hey, you know, let's try this." And you know, it's where I smoked pot for the first time, snorted coke for the first time, and I don't know what clue my mom saw, but she yanked me out of there within, you know, like I said, 9 months, and I still remember it was April, around about the first part of April, and she said, "Well, you don't have to go to school this morning. You know, we're gonna spend some time together." I said, "Okay," and she's like, "Well, you know, about 8, 9 o'clock," she was like, "Get in the car." I went and got in the car, and she was in the front seat, Dad was in the passenger seat, I'm in the back seat. And we drove uptown all the way to North Salt Lake and stopped at some crazy building, had this amazing moat around the whole building with a walkway up the front. We walked in the front doors, and that's, about 10 minutes later is when reality hit. You're here, you're staying. And sitting in a room with another therapist, and yeah.
So just another opportunity, another program that just kind of a rehab that kind of just walks you through those steps. So you experience that again.
12-step drug rehabilitation center. They focus on the 12 steps, not for drugs and alcohol, but for life skills. I wasn't the youngest one there, and I sure wasn't the oldest. I think the oldest person there was 19 years old and had signed himself in. But there were people there 12 years and up, so between 12 and 18 really.
Yeah.
And they focused on behaviors and changing behaviors, fixing behaviors. Their focal point was you can't fix or you can't change the behavior until you fix what's broken. And so they used the 12 steps, especially step 4, to really get to the root of the problem. Every day was super structured. You never went anywhere alone. You always had I don't want to say sponsor, but you always had somebody higher up in the program with you. Once a week, I met with we as a group, almost everything was done as a group in group therapy, but they brought in a sexual abuse therapist, one for guys, one for girls. I want to say there were probably about 10 or 12 of us in that same group. Amazing man, amazing therapist. His name was Alan Dibble. He really kind of started me on the process of understanding how my body works and the dysfunction of being sexually abused and the criminology or the mentality of how this has changed my brain and how I think different and I view things, I view the world different than other people.
Yeah.
Because of that trauma, even though I didn't at the time view it as trauma. That was just my life. That was just the circumstances.
Yeah, yeah. So you would at this point in time, you had gone to a couple different places, family dynamics with this family for 9 months, this center, and there would be a time frame in which you were kind of moving forward and then kind of cycle back into some things. At what point did it really hit and say, okay, I want to see a long-term effect? When did that take place? Was that a little bit older? Who was
way
kind of
older?
What
Way older.
what kind of influence? Who was that person?
I would say the person that really made that influence or started that process would have been Ronnie Smith.
Okay, and how old were you at the time?
I was 24.
Okay, yeah.
So my wife and I had both left the Mormon church. She had started attending a Christian church. And it was a church plant by a pastor. And it was all about non-denominational Christian. We're Christians and we're not adhering to the Mormon religion or Catholicism or, the Methodist. I think those were the three that were there in southern Utah when we were there. Later down the road, he came out and said, well, I'm Southern Baptist, and this is a Southern Baptist church. But yeah, he and I had a lot of, in my mind, a lot of real theological conversations.
Yeah. What was your thoughts on non-denominational Christianity at that point, meeting this person, especially as someone who has processed a lot of different experiences to try to help you in your life and through your brokenness? Did you see church as something that was good? Did you see church that was something that was just other people needed, but then this person was a little bit different?
And in my life at that time, church was a negative.
Okay.
The rigid structure, and you have to earn your way, or if you're not worthy enough.
Mm-hmm.
I left the Mormon church, but I left on not so good terms in my mind.
Yeah.
They had told me that I wasn't worthy enough to fulfill my duties. So
you meet this guy, and he's just,
yeah.
What does he say that just gives you that, okay, let's go here, let's do this?
I never fully committed with Pastor Ron. And, I mean, he's the one that started me thinking and started me on this path. Like I said, he's a great man. Every conversation we had always went back to the Bible. He asked me one time, he said, well, why don't you come to church? And I told him, I said, I can be just as close to God or closer to God on a mountainside with a fishing pole fishing than I'll ever be sitting in the pew at church. And he said, that sounds amazing. Can I come? Now, he never did go fishing with me because he was the pastor, but he wanted to. He actually took me on my first men's advanced or men's retreat. And that was very much Southern Baptist, which it really didn't bother me that, after attending church very infrequently, but that's where I would at the time would have called home or church home.
Yeah. And at that time, are you still dealing with some of these the addictions that you described? Like,
oh yeah,
still working through that. So you're meeting this guy, and you're kind of building this new. You're walking away from the Mormon church. You're starting this new kind of journey. Still struggling. Still looking for things to help.
Looking for peace.
Yeah.
Really. But I mean, I had fully walked away from the Mormon church. 3-4 years before that. But I was drinking very heavily at that time. Usually about a half gallon a day and chasing it with, a 12-pack or more. I had actually drank myself into liver failure at 20 years old, not even legal to drink yet. And I was seeing a dermatologist and going on liver treatments to restart my liver. And Ronnie never judged me for any of that. He never made it a point to point it out. He never made it an issue. He always just said, there's another way. And left it for me for when I was ready. As a Christian, we always talk about planting the seeds. He planted the seeds. And too often we plant the seeds and we don't see what happens. Somebody else comes along and waters it. Fertilizes it. But for a little tiny church plant, he was planting a lot of seeds.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're still in Utah. How do you get to Georgia? How do you get to Americus?
So I married my wife at 19 years old. She was born in Warner Robins.
Okay.
Her grandparents lived in Buena Vista. And most of her cousins on both sides of the family, her mom's and dad's side, all lived within 30 minutes of Buena Vista. Plains and Mont, mostly. So we came back here on vacation when we first got married, and she told me, she said, man, I love it here. I want to move home. And to put it bluntly, I was a raging alcoholic in construction. I was making, I think, $18, $20 an hour at the time. 20 years ago, that was good money.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, absolutely not. so long as I pay the bills, we're going to stay where I pay the bills. Jump forward, 2006, the housing market crashed, and I found myself unemployed. Still drinking like a fish, and but I was now kind of realizing, there's a whole nother Christian world out there. But we were, with the housing market, we were losing everything. So on one side, my spiritual growth was starting to, we'll say, sprout or mature. I was, being discipled, which had never really happened in my life, at least to that point. But again, losing everything physically. I mean, we were selling vehicles, giving everything away. We bought our house back out of foreclosure once. And I was 90 days behind again. And I called a buddy of mine who was working in the oil field, and I said, I need a job. And he come through. He loaned me enough money to pay my house payment. Drive from St. George, Utah, which is about as far southwest as you can go, to central Wyoming to go apply for a job and go to school and get a job. And I want to say back then he loaned me about $3,000. No strings, no questions, pay me back when you can. And I went to the oil field. And going from pretty much house in foreclosure to $24 an hour, working 80-hour weeks. My wife and I closed up my business. I was a general contractor. We were round about $150,000 or $200,000 in debt, which we kind of saw things coming, and we didn't go out. We were selling things and liquidating assets as we could, whereas we had friends and people in my circle that were going bankrupt for like 15 to 20 million. And we literally walked away from projects unfinished just to stay out of the black, or out of the red and stay in the black. But I want to say it was after I'd been in the oil field 6 years, I switched companies from Utah and Rocky Mountain based, Southern Rocky based, to North Dakota. Double the distance to drive, but double the money. Where the top out in Utah was like $30 an hour, I would start at $30 an hour in North Dakota. And right about then, we came back here to see my wife's grandparents and visit. And she said, I really want to move home. And the one thing I want to emphasize is this literally went through my brain. And my first instinct was to say no. I pay the bills, we're going to live where I pay the bills. And literally in my brain, I said, what kind of prick tells his wife no when you're not home? She needs to be where she is happy and where she feels supported. And we kind of had this whole conversation throughout the day about it. She felt more supported and more connected to her family and cousins here than she did to her own siblings there at the time.
Wow.
So
when you get to Americus, you and your wife get to Americus, still carrying a lot of the weight, have some people in your life throughout your life, just kind of little blips. You're like, okay, something's happening to me, right? You get to Americus. What does that look like for you and your wife? What's the next thing that impacts you when you get here?
Well, I guess the next thing that impacts me is my wife started going to Celebrate Recovery. And I mean, she can share her story with that at a later date. But part of her testimony is that she started going to Celebrate Recovery to learn how to deal with my addiction and me. I was still, even though had been impacted by the Christianity, and at one point I would consider myself being awakened and yearning to know more. But when we moved here and we lost contact, I mean, we pretty much cut contact with everything. We moved here with a bedroom set and a washer and dryer. That was it. She started attending Ellaville Baptist, which was right across the street from where we lived. And I want to say she attended there for probably a year. I only went twice a year. Neither time was Christmas or Easter. I always felt that was the hypocritical time to go. So I would go like 2 weeks before and the week after Christmas. So she started attending Celebrate Recovery to learn how to deal with me and my active addiction. I remember she invited me. She said, well, why don't you come down here and just meet the people that I'm spending my Monday nights with? And I said, nah, I'm really not that interested. And then the next time she said, well, why don't you come and meet these people just to know that I'm saved? And I said, I don't know about that. And she said, well, we're eating supper. You come down there and they're it's amazing, food. And so I was like, all right, for supper I'll go.
Yeah.
And I was working a 2-week on, 2-week off schedule at the time. So I was able to come and attend 2 weeks and then be in North Dakota 2 weeks. So when I say that we moved here in 2012, I never fully moved here until 2015. I spent at least half my year in North Dakota, or 9 months a year in North Dakota. And then when I would be here, I'd be here for 2 weeks at a time. Which is crazy. Georgia says I owe them taxes, but I paid a boatload of taxes to North Dakota, which I never get back. Yeah. But throughout that time.
Yeah. So when you started attending CR, what impact did that make on you? And when you fully integrated into Americus, you're here now. How has CR? Did you stay with CR? Did you?
I did.
What's that?
I can't say that I'm a full-time attender. Because of my job I have now, I catch a meeting when I can. But to sit down and Celebrate Recovery.
What is Celebrate Recovery too? Just for those that may not know.
So for those that don't know, Celebrate Recovery is a recovery. Well, it's a Christian-based recovery program. So when you hear people talk about Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, they always use the term higher power. The reason being is because they want to be all-inclusive. They don't want to turn people away at the door because they don't believe in the same higher power. And they want to be accepting to reach out and help all who are hurting. The only difference in Celebrate Recovery and those programs is Jesus Christ is my higher power. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm not ashamed to pray and ask Jesus for help with my daily struggles. Because as Christians, when you start getting real with yourself and other people, you realize that you still struggle, you still have problems. And biblically, it says, ask and pray for one another. Share your problems, share your addictions. It all depends on the translated version you want to use, but basically share your life with one another and pray for each other that you might be healed. Yeah. And then Celebrate Recovery brings back all the original scriptures that the 12 steps were founded on, and we use those with the 12 steps the way that the author originally intended them to be used.
Yeah.
So Celebrate Recovery is a 12-step. I'm not saying self-help. It's definitely not I can't fix you. I mean, my best decisions got me there. So,
yeah.
But I can sit there and I can point to Jesus because He's the one that'll help you.
Wow.
He's the one that'll heal you. He's the one that will fix you.
So you go through this CR, you're a part of it, and is that what you attribute to your release, rescue from addiction at that point, or?
Working through the 12 steps again, yeah. And really adhering to them. And honoring God as my higher power. And asking for that, healing power or healing presence of prayer in my life. And admitting my faults and my flaws to those people around us. Celebrate Recovery is, in my opinion, the most genuine group of Christians I've ever met at multiple different Celebrate Recoveries. You find people who generally care, who generally seek Jesus in most, if not all, their affairs and everything they do. They let the chips fall where it is and they just ask God for guidance. And in my opinion, that's what church is supposed to be like. But it's ours and it's our sanctuary. It's our peace. But both of us are very active in Celebrate Recovery, both here in Americus and in Albany, where we met our friend Paul Nixon. Some great people down there. Great people. And the one thing I do want to add about Celebrate Recovery is it's a multi-denominational. Anyone that claims Christ to be their higher power or Christ to be God is welcome. I mean, all are welcome. But
it's explicit in its in that understanding of who are we looking to for help, healing, rescue.
So not to get off track, but I work 3.5 days a week. I get my 40 hours usually by noon on Thursday. Thursday afternoon I go down to New Life. I want to say it's an ACR, it's a community resource center for addiction. At first I was running a Bible study or leading a Bible study. That kind of worked and kind of didn't. There are some people down there that are interested in a Bible study and going through the Bible verse by verse, book by book. But there's more people there that just want to know how God is in their life, how God works in recovery. Where was God in my active addiction? And where was God in all my misery and suffering? So my Thursdays are more spent, I guess, just being present and answering questions and walking people through that process. And essentially, that small part of discipling or planting seeds.
One of the things that you mentioned in our email correspondence was, and I'm probably going to misstate it, but this idea that like the addictions in of themselves are, we think that they're the drugs, the alcohol. There's a deeper level that people need to tap into to recognize, and when you're not in that world, you don't understand that.
That's right. So people who are addicted or strung out, what people don't realize is that they're hurting people. They're lost. They're confused. They don't know where else to turn, what else to do. The drug and alcohol scene somehow became normal. I've been counseling a guy who ended up in a drug rehabilitation center. He went to prison at a young age. Lost everything when he went to prison. Lost his children, wife remarried, came out, met somebody else, got remarried, screwed up, however, ended up back in prison. He spent more of his adult life in prison than he has out of prison. And his problem is he just doesn't know how to relate. He doesn't know how to function. And so when he comes out, I mean, he has no friends, nobody. So when he comes out, the first people that are accepting are the drug addicts and the alcoholics. Because it's a revolving door. They're in and out. They understand.
Yeah.
So he's trying to reintegrate himself into society and into life. He realizes that what he's been doing hasn't worked. And now he's saying, how do I do this different?
Yeah.
And somehow in this Celebrate Recovery process, Jesus has become his higher power. He might not have been, or it might not have been his higher power when he started, but 12 months later, he's all in.
Yeah.
And how do I live, and how do I live well? How do I become a good part of society?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of where my focus is. I realize that, I'm never going to be Billy Graham. Billy Graham was a great man. And I'm never going to be, some kind of great biblical apostle. That's not what God's called me to be. God's called me to be a gardener, is the way I look at it. Plant the seeds he wants me to plant. And I water and fertilize where he sets me.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that you feel like as being a part of Americus, and other places too, but I mean, being
right
here.
Right here.
We talked earlier, right before we started, just the future of Americus, where we hope things to be. And one of the terms that you used was, this idea of as Americus moves forward, healing needs to be a part of that.
It does.
And so, give me your thoughts on that, on just that idea of, man, you probably know people in Americus, or if you don't know them personally, you know that there are stories in Americus where people, again, we're not just talking about the addictions like what we see, but the underpinning of those things. What would you hope to see in the future as Americus moves forward in that sense?
So now this is strictly my opinion, and there's going to be a lot of people that want to argue this or differ with this. But there's still a lot of racial segregation that goes on underneath the surface. And unfortunately, it's a learned behavior. The community I grew up in, or as a teenager, well, even as a child, I don't remember a single black child at school, not one. In high school, there was one in my high school. There were 3 in the entire county I lived in. 6 total, but 3 of them were in high school, and spread out between 4 different high schools. So I didn't grow up with a whole bunch of racist comments or remarks. And unfortunately, I have been called a racist to my face. It hurts. I don't see color. You're just a man. Act like it. If you don't know how to act, we could talk about it. Because somewhere along the way, and like I say, this is just my opinion, people give each other a bad hand up, a bad shake, So for starters, that's where people are people. We're all equal in the sight of God. And some of my best friends are men of color here today. And it hurts me that they have been hurt by people's blindness. So that's where I would start. The second place I would go is with recovery centers. Our recovery community is very small. I would honestly say it's sick. Not from a dysfunctional standpoint. Alcoholics Anonymous, I mean, I don't attend, so I assume that they function the way they're supposed to. Narcotics Anonymous, I assume they function the way they're supposed to. Celebrate Recovery functions the way it needs to stay healthy. But as a community, we look down on people who are addicted. And as soon as we look down on them and we turn our back and we don't give them the help, we don't see them as people anymore. We see them as junkies, crackheads, alcoholics, child abusers, family abusers. But we really need to heal families and heal people to help our community go forward. Whether that's from drugs and alcohol, or whether that's just training people how to be better parents, better stewards of what you've got, better stewards of your finances. This is the one thing that first impressed me about Georgia. Not everybody needs to have the newest, biggest truck. I mean, which was insane crazy about southern Utah. It's no different than California. I mean, everybody's got to have the same truck with a 10-inch lift and great big huge wheels and tires. I mean, a lot of people here are all right just being genuine and real. But I learned very quickly that they turn a blind eye and I don't have those problems, so I don't need that.
Yeah.
And in reality, I haven't met a single person that doesn't need Celebrate Recovery. Everybody needs a little more Jesus.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I've noticed just coming into a new community, the idea of neighboring, especially again, you know, one of the things, you know, you buy a house or you're renting, and you don't know the people around you and you don't know their stories, and you may see how they interact. You know, get into their car and they may interact or they may act differently. They may have different dysfunctions in their lives, in your mind. But the reality is that what you're stating is hey, as good neighbors, we need to be aware that that people's actions are part of their story.
Absolutely.
And it seems to me that being a good neighbor is being aware that people have stories that you have no idea what they're experiencing, and the desire to be a part of something that's even greater than what they've experienced, but they need someone to be willing to risk that, sacrifice, to say, hey, you know, again, not how do I help, but how do I come alongside of you and tell me a little bit about what's going on, and it's needed, right?
Absolutely. And the empathy to say, I understand.
Yeah,
you know?
That's very, very important. So, and I think, like I said, coming into a new community, paying attention, meeting you, becoming more and more aware of every city. Every city has good things. Every city has things to celebrate. Every city has things. There's parts of our city that are broken, and the reason why they're broken is because people are limited, and they're broken. And again, not coming in as, you know, I'm going to come fix things, but I just want to come and be a part. And I need to hear people's stories before I begin to start assuming I know this person because of the way they're acting. Maybe there's something that I need to learn from them, and I think that's very, very important. So, and I think your story helps with that, to be a part. You sharing your story with us is another testament of you don't have to be a byproduct of the things that happen to you, especially if they're negative. You don't have to be that. That's not what defines you. Other things can define you. And for you, it's, okay, well, I met this God named Jesus, and He has come to define me. And I think that's really, really important, and you're giving that out to others. You're not in a corner just saying, hey, it's just me now. I'm fixed, quote unquote, or I'm being fixed. It's other people need to experience the same things I'm experiencing. And I think that's part of neighboring, is willing to give that out to others. And you being an advocate for that, I think, is very, very important.
Well, and in the Christian circle, we talk about it as discipling. In the addiction or recovery community, we call it being a sponsor. In the mental health community, we call it coaching or life coaching or skills coaching. But the reality is, it's all the same thing. You're teaching the person under you to mirror you. And if we can all learn to be discipled and follow and serve the community around us and create or have disciples mirror us, we could have a whole community of servants. And we could fix the community in light years, record time.
Yeah.
If we would all just figure out how to serve one another and to serve one another well.
Yeah, that's huge. Well, Aaron, I want to end our time together just with some kind of rapid fire questions, just to kind of get to know you a little bit more. So more on the light end of things, in the sense that, just your personality and kind of what you like to do. So let me ask you this: what is your favorite restaurant or favorite food? However you want to define it.
My favorite food, I would say, would probably be Mexican food.
Okay.
My favorite restaurant is definitely Euro City.
Nice. Okay.
Which is not
It's
Mexican.
right across from here. Yeah,
That's right.
I see it from over there.
Amazing people,
Yeah.
amazing food. They have amazing stories if you have time to sit and talk to them.
That's awesome. Okay. What is your most recent favorite movie or book that you've read recently?
Well, I read more books than I listen to them on Audible. And I would say the favorite one, I can't even remember the lady's name or the title of the book, was Becoming a Follower of Jesus. I ought to look real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. That's fine.
My phone will unlock. Let's see. I need to go.
So you're an Audible guy?
I do.
Yeah.
And I put my earbuds in, and some people think I'm crazy, but I will literally put my earbuds in, and it doesn't matter what the book is. I can be asleep in 5 minutes.
That's great.
Multiply is the one I'm in the middle of right now, Francis Chan. Jesus Over Everything by Lisa Whittle.
Nice. Jesus Over Everything by Lisa Whittle. It's good.
That's the best one I've read in a while.
Yeah. And you also mentioned if someone wanted to become a part of CR or knew someone that CR would be a good place for them to start, a good community for them to be a part of. You said they meet on Mondays?
Monday night, 6:30 at Cornerstone Church, 245 Southland Drive.
Okay.
We meet in the education building behind the church. The entrance is actually on Upper River Road, not Southland Drive. So you just drive around the corner. There's a whole nother parking lot entrance. Come on in. That's, there's a white sign on the door.
Yeah.
It says Celebrate Recovery, and we'll get around to putting out a great big yellow one.
That's great.
So,
all right. Last question. Favorite go-to karaoke song?
I don't karaoke.
You don't care? You don't sing?
No.
Not at all.
I croak like a bullfrog, so we give you a whole nother question if you need it.
No, that's fine. So what favorite song do you?
Lately I listen to exclusively contemporary Christian music.
Okay.
Casting Crowns is kind of my favorite group at the moment.
Okay.
And I mean, I know most of the words to most of their songs.
Yeah, that's great.
But 5 years of listening to pretty much nothing but contemporary Christian music, I feel like I'm pretty well versed in most of the songs.
I hear you. Well, Aaron, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for sharing some of your story. Again, there are so many people that have maybe similar stories, or know people with similar stories, or again, as a neighbor, see other people in their scope that may need to better understand what people are experiencing, especially if their behaviors look like that, and they're just like, well, what do I do? Where do I come into play? Or help them better understand. Don't just look at them for their behaviors. Understand there's a story there. And so thank you so much for doing that. I've been encouraged by your story, and I look forward to being a neighbor in Americus, and just continuing to fight the good fight, and to build a thriving city here in Americus, Georgia. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.